Hello, welcome back. Again, we're in the Information Center at the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. This is the second session now of our Sake Future Summit 2022, held, of course, in January 2023. And we're going to continue on the topic of sake and its implications for sales and enjoyment and education around the world. We are, again, bringing together a diversely located and just plain old diverse panel of experts from around the world, people on the inside of the industry who are at the forefront of bringing new palates and fans to this category. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome my new friend Weston to the show, who is going to be moderating. Weston, how you doing?
Great. How are you, Chris?
I'm very good. What time is it where you are right now?
So it's about 7:30 p.m. our time and on the East Coast.
7:30 p.m. your time, East Coast yesterday, from my perspective. Do you need a weather report? I can tell you what to look forward to if you need.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I can also give you the Wordle answer if you need it as well. So Weston, I'm going to just hand this right over to you so that you can get started so you have plenty of time. Folks in the audience, once again, please don't hesitate to leave questions and comments. We do monitor them, and I will bring them around to the panel at the end of the session so that we can hear from these experts. Without further ado, Weston, I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks so much. And I'd like to extend a warm thank you to Imada-san and our friends at JSS for this incredible opportunity to take part in this year's Sake Future Summit. I saw last year's summit and it was just really a wealth of information, and we're so pleased to be a part of it this year. So my name is, for those of you who don't know me, Weston Konishi. I'm president of the Sake Brewers Association of North America. We're a trade association dedicated to promoting and advocating for the sake industry in North America. That includes the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And we do this through a range of programs and initiatives, such as our American Craft Sake Festival, which we had in Nashville, North Carolina, last spring, and our Sake Stakeholders Summit, which we held in September in Washington, D.C. That was a gathering of key stakeholders and representatives from across the sake supply chain in North America to discuss the current state of the industry and where we want to take it in 5 to 10 years. It was really a very enlightening program, and two of our panelists tonight were at that. So that was a very, very interesting program. And we're also getting more and more into providing training and development for sake brewers here. We'll be embarking on a training program at Gakogura in Niigata Prefecture, scheduled for this coming summer for several of our sake brewers based in North America. So those are just some of the things that we do. If you'd like to learn more about what we're up to and our activities, I encourage our viewers to go to www.sakeassociation.org to learn more about us. We're really interested in talking about today's topic, making sake mainstream in the U.S. market. This is a really important topic that we grapple with pretty much every day in the North American sake world. Sake has, though, made great gains, I think, in the U.S. market. I remember the days when you could pretty much only get mass-produced sakes in certain cities. That's changed a lot. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, and I can just go to the liquor store around the corner from where I live and get a really nice namagenshu these days. And so that just tells you that sake has come quite far over the years. All that said, though, it represents just a fraction of the overall U.S. Alcoholic beverage market. According to some studies, it's just 0.2% of the overall market here. And so I think you can safely say sake is still a niche product of sorts in the US market. There's not enough consumer knowledge and awareness still. And there's not enough, I think, marketing in contrast to other categories. You don't see a whole lot of sake advertising in North America. Um, so that all begs the question: what would bringing sake in the mainstream look like? And to me personally, I'd love to see sake breweries in pretty much every state across the country, and at least several in some of the major cities. I'd love to see it on the shelves of pretty much all the good liquor stores and restaurants across the country, not just in Japanese restaurants and in major metropolises, but really in other parts of the country as well. And I'd love to see more consumers with a better sense of what they really like about sake and about and their sort of proclivities for and particular tastes in sakes that they gravitate more toward. Um, and to have, I think, a better sense of what they like in sake, especially in pairing with foods, not just Japanese cuisine. So what do we need to do to break through to the next level? I think there's a lot of a lot of answers to that question. I'll just throw out a few for consideration. I think, obviously we need, I think, a broader consumer base across the country. Looser restrictions on selling sake across state lines and in local markets would be very helpful, and we are working on that at the association. We need to continue to grow the number of craft sake breweries across the country. I think can lead to more access to high quality sake at the local level, and I think that as consumers in these local areas become more exposed to sake in their neighborhoods and their communities, their awareness and knowledge of sake will in turn increase. And I think so there's a lot of opportunity there, I see. We also need more effective marketing approaches that I think appeal to a younger generation of consumers. Something that really targets their tastes, their preferences, and in many ways even their values. So these are just, I think, some of a handful of things that I think could bring sake more into the mainstream market. So in that light, I'm very pleased and happy to have three of our association members here tonight to share their thoughts and insights and perspectives on this topic. We have Matt Bell, who's CEO and president of Origami Sake in Hot Springs, Arkansas. That's a brewery that's still in development and going to be opening up soon. So it's very exciting. Nina Murphy, who's owner of Sunflower Sake, a sake shop in Portland, Oregon, where she's doing a number of really cool and innovative programs to introduce sake to American consumers. And then finally, we have Pablo Rivera, co-founder of WESAKE, a new sake brand based in New York City. They brew their sake in Japan and can it and sell it in the U.S. market. So with that, let's turn over to Matt Bell. Matt, you come from a successful business background, largely in green energy contracting and construction. So I'd like to ask you what first got you into sake, and what made you invest in opening a sake brewery in Hot Springs, Arkansas.
Yeah, short of being crazy, it was the introduction from Ben Bell, and I'm an Arkansas native. I was born and raised in Arkansas. I went to the University of Arkansas, and by happenstance, I met Ben, who is no relation to me, at a gathering, and he had just gotten back from Japan, and he had spent 2 years at Nambu Bijan. And he told me that we had some mutual friends that had a brewery here in Arkansas, a very successful craft brewery. And he said, I'm going to start a sake brewery here in Hot Springs, Arkansas, taking advantage of the inherent values of Arkansas, which is we grow 48% of the rice in the U.S., and Hot Springs is renowned for the water. And his term to me was, there's no reason Arkansas shouldn't be the Napa Valley of sake. And that just clicked with me back in 2016, honestly. And I never forgot it. And my business, I've had several businesses. I'm a serial entrepreneur. And about a year ago, I knew I was going to sell the business I was in, the solar development business. And this was the only business that came to mind that I thought had brought a lot of inherent values or inherent benefits of the state of Arkansas that we could bring to the nation and potentially internationally.
That's great. What can you elaborate a little bit more about what those inherent benefits are?
Sure. As I mentioned, we have Arkansas as a state. The disadvantages are we are a very rural community and our state. We have about 3 million people as far as our population goes, which creates a lot of challenges from a business perspective. With only 3 million people in the state, opening a tap room for a sake tap room is probably not a very smart business plan, right? So we had to look at this from a different perspective. And from our business planning, we looked at doing this very large from the start. So our capacity at our brewery is about 800,000 liters annually. And therefore we plan on distributing throughout, nationwide fairly quickly. By being in the state of Arkansas, 48% of the rice is grown here. Our water resources are abundant and they're ideal for sake. The city where our brewery is located is Hot Springs, Arkansas. It's a national park with some of the most pristine water in the world. One of the best international brands is called Mountain Valley Water, and they're using water from the same aquifer we're sourcing our water from. It's a 152-year-old company that sells premium water throughout the world. With those combination of those two things, obviously that's the two key ingredients in making sake, and then obviously great staff and good branding. So,
right. And you also happen to be within shooting distance of Oregon of our friends, the rice producers in Arkansas.
yes,
as well.
Isabel Farms. So so Isabel Farms, who many people on this in this summit would probably be aware of, they're about 70 miles from our location, from the farm to our brewery, which is very fortunate. They have been growing Sakamai for decades, and actually just a couple of days ago they won Arkansas Farm Family of the Year. So no, I'm sorry, they've already won that. They won. Chris Isbell was inducted into the Arkansas Agriculture Hall of Fame.
That's great. Well, it's well deserved for sure.
Great family, good people.
Right. So you have all this business experience, and it's just striking to me that having on the business savvy, you looked at the sake industry and you said, "Oh, this." I mean, I have to assume that you thought there's a lot of promise in that. I'd love to get your take on what you see are the sort of from a business perspective, what are the opportunities with the sake industry, and what do you see are sort of the main challenges, and particularly as it pertains to our theme tonight?
Sure. I'm probably the least experienced person in this business from a sake perspective. And my perception, I was very pleased to see the report, the study that you all commissioned at SBA&A about the market research. It really validated a lot of the same thoughts that I had about the market. When I was introduced to premium craft sake, it was absolutely a different beverage than I thought of growing up here in Arkansas, and really 98% of Americans. And we were introduced to sake back during the sushi craze and decades ago. And what was sent to the US was mass-produced sake. And you hear of people, when you talk about sake, it's only warm, and a sake bomb would come out. They're just unaware in general of the potential of sake, right? And so it's changing that perception. It's a heavier lift for us, but I think it's important for I think that the perception of sake, just having that experience again, one of your oldest memories is taste and smell. And it's really hard to get somebody back when they try something they did not like the taste of or the smell of, right? To try that again. So it's really a reintroduction of sake is what we feel like it needs to happen. So we're focused on, American palates, very diverse styles. And like you said, our marketing and the breakdown of how we're going to market is more accessibility. The terminology, which I've recently learned over the past couple of years, most Americans are not aware of. A Nagori, for instance, or a Junmai, or a Junmai Ginjo, or a Junmai Daiginjo, those are insider terms, and they're a barrier for people that are going to shop at a retailer, or they're intimidated on a wine list, right? So we're trying to simplify that and make it more accessible, similar to branding of wines, and that's kind of our approach.
Right. That's great. And I know that you're not yet producing, and hopefully that'll be coming out soon. But do you have a sense yet of just within Arkansas of what where people are in terms of the familiarity with sake? Do you see pockets of real understanding of sake, or is it there's still quite a steep learning curve?
There are pockets of it, but we have had a couple of test batches that we've put out and had people sample, right? And everyone, without exception, is absolutely blown away. And the first thing they say, and this is something that you wouldn't necessarily see in a major market like New York or Los Angeles. There's more experienced palates, but here in the South and the rural states throughout America, just trying to craft sake is probably their first experience they've ever had with it, and they would not know that was sake. And everyone is pleasantly surprised, and to the degree that our distributor here in the state, they had 40 salespeople, and they were all not very excited about picking up a sake line until they tried it. And they said, this is just nothing like we thought it was. And that's really what we're hearing throughout the state. Right. And I think that's true throughout many parts of America.
Right. That's really great. And I will note that we're really happy to have quite a few now new sake breweries sprouting up across the South. So it's really great to see, sake breweries in Nashville and Tennessee and Lexington, Kentucky, and there's going to be some coming up in Florida. So it's really a really dynamic region as a whole for sake, it looks like. So that's really great. Thank you, Matt. Let's maybe shift gears over to Nina at this point. Nina, tell us about how you got into sake and some of your plans for sunflower sake.
Thanks, Weston. Thanks also to the JSS and to Sake on Air for the invitation to participate today. It's always fun to talk about my sake origin story and to chime in on these subjects. So the complicated version of that story is that from a very young age, I was drawn to Japanese popular culture, like so many Americans. I grew up watching anime, playing video games. And when I was 21, my preferred beer brand was probably Kirin Ichiban, because I thought the label was cool. I thought it was cool to drink Japanese beer. At that time, like so many of us, I tried some sake. I think it was probably like a California-made, mass-produced brand, and I thought it was pretty forgettable. So I stuck with beer and cocktails for a very long time. And then I ended up getting into sake initially through food. In my mid-20s, my husband and I loved cooking, and we bought a Japanese grill and we hosted parties and enjoyed a lot of sake in the backyard. But Even at the time, $35 for a bottle of sake was a stretch. We were lucky to have a Japanese grocery store down the street, so we could pick things at random and hope that they were good. And but I think relatively early in my life as a result, compared to most consumers, so my mid-20s, I was exposed to good sake, and it was about that point that I learned that I really liked it. And I remember a few bottles from that time that completely shifted my perspective. So the idea was plugged in the back of my head at that point that sake could be this quality thing. But in California, that's probably an awareness that people had earlier than in other places. Many years later, I moved to Oregon. I got into the wine industry. I fell in love with wine, and I explored all corners of the industry. I worked as a harvest hand, as a viticultural intern, as a steward in tasting rooms. And I even visited Katsunuma, Yamanashi in 2020, which is a Japanese wine country. I was completely blown away by the quality of the wine there, but also of the sake. So my career kind of culminated in wine when I was working for a wine distributor, and I was sort of coming face to face with a lot of challenges in the wine industry at the time. And this was in a period, of course, in the pandemic, which brought out kind of the worst and the best sides of the industry. It was during the wine tariffs that we were experiencing here in the US, which was crushing to the hospitality industry at the time. At this time, also, the wine industry was undergoing the Me Too movement, which was calling out some of the largest organizations and figures in the wine world. Some of the most influential wine organizations in the US came under fire. And it was necessary. It needed to happen. So it was in this context that I rethought my career, and I was deciding whether I wanted to continue in wine or whether I wanted to pursue my second love, which was sake, and had been sake for a really long time. And for me, it was a really obvious choice to make, because I felt that sake was a product that had incredible potential, completely unrealized potential. And it was a bright green and wide open pasture. It's unlike wine, which is, at this point, somewhat saturated. There's a lot of rules around wine. There's a lot of pretension and, access issues. And now there's all these social issues that were coming up around wine. Sake was sort of this place where I could engage freely and create my own rules, and potentially even create our own American culture. And especially being exposed to Den Sake a couple years earlier, and Den is a sake brewer located in Oakland, California, and trying his sake and being super impressed by it. I thought that just growth was inevitable, and I wanted to be a part of it. Anyone can say, if you find this really, really special thing that's undiscovered or relatively undiscovered, you think like, oh my God, like I need to share this with everybody, or there's such a great opportunity here to make a career for myself. And that's really what happened. So when I decided to open up Sunflower Sake, it was as much about a passion for sake as it was a business opportunity. There was a practical reason why I decided to go into sake and decided to open up Sunflower Sake. I felt like there was an opportunity there to do my own thing and to not have the competition that I saw in the wine world. And so that's why I got this going, and it's been extremely well received. I'm lucky here to be in a city that already has a thriving sake culture. We have a sake brewery that's been here for over 20 years, Sake One. It's located about 45 minutes outside of town. We have some extremely highly regarded sake professionals in Portland, Oregon. Marcus Pekizer is a sake samurai who has been working here for a very long time. And the overall market, product awareness is relatively high in the Pacific Northwest, where I have consumers coming in who maybe know that basic terminology. They know the word junmai, they know junmai ginjo, or they come in saying, I like sake, I just don't know what I like. So I see myself, and I see Portland, Oregon as being an example of what any city that's getting its sake brewery, its first sake brewery, could look like in 5 years, where the level of awareness and comprehension has reached a tipping point where people know they like it. They're just looking for an opportunity to dive deeper and learn more. Because after 20 years of drinking the local brand, people are really curious to learn more, and they're curious to engage with more Japanese brands, and they're curious to experiment more with serveware and with food and with pairings and do all that at home.
Yeah, and from my conversations with you, it seems like you've, and just looking at what you're doing on Instagram and on your social media platforms, like you're doing a lot of really innovative things to try to sort of really push that along, right? That people's discovery of sake and deepening knowledge of it, and sort of trying to maximize its potential, especially in pairing with foods. Can you tell us a little bit more of some of your more recent projects in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've done a couple of different things. I think one of the core issues for consumers who are curious and want to learn more is just a lack of access to education. There's some resources online and there are some books, but the overall number and quality are still a work in progress. So for me, starting with a financially accessible bi-weekly class that people can come in, pay $15, taste a range of high quality sake and sit down for an hour and learn about an interesting subject, that is the cornerstone of my educational outreach. And people can come in any time of the week and have a conversation with me about sake and get a flight and have the opportunity to learn something. But for those who want to dive deeper and want to really get to know the product more closely, these bi-weekly classes are an opportunity to do that. And because it's a low barrier to entry, you can flow in and out of them as you see fit. And I see a lot of industry people coming into these classes, and I offer a flat discount to all industry members to try and encourage their participation. Because as much as I want to educate consumers, trends really only catch on when industry members take an interest in them. If for every sommelier who gets excited about sake, that will be their entire audience then will get excited about sake because they'll start to utilize sake in their tasting menus. Or for every wine buyer who decides to carry some sake in their shop, they are then going to evangelize to their audience. So for me, it's really about making these classes and lessons especially accessible and especially interesting to industry. And for that reason, they aren't necessarily like Sake 101 classes. I'm diving into more complicated subjects bi-weekly that I think would be interesting and engaging for an industry professional who has a background in wine or in beer. The other things that I'm doing are I am partnering with some sommeliers and chefs and beverage professionals in the area to move the conversation forward with respect to sake pairing, to start making more resources available online that others can turn to if they want to Google, how to pair sake with mole. Or, in my case, one of the first classes I did was how to pair, experimenting with pairing sake with Russian American food, because that's my personal cultural heritage. Just making those resources available in English and putting them on the internet so that they can be found is something that will be of value perhaps to someone in another state, a year from now. As long as those resources exist, people can find them. But if they don't exist, then everyone thinks that they're starting from square one. I'm also hosting a festival later on this month, which is bringing in it's not just a sake festival. It's also a sort of festival that celebrates all of these other communities that are related to and kind of on the periphery of sake's culture. So, that could involve like tea, that could involve food, of course, like different types of like Japanese cuisine, fermentation, and also love for the outdoors. I think that sake has a natural affinity for the outdoors because of its inherent seasonality, the seasonality of sake releases, and Portland's own love for the outdoors. So it's sort of a natural fit for us here too. So those are a couple of different programs that I'm leaning into to try and make sake more accessible and exciting. And interesting to our local consumers and to our industry members.
Great. I kind of wish I lived on the West Coast so that I could take advantage of some of those. Those sound great. You were a participant in our Sake Stakeholders Summit in September in Washington, and I thought you raised some really interesting points based on your experience working in the wine distribution arena. And I was wondering if you had any, if you could share with our viewers tonight about some of the sort of observations you had taken from the wine industry, and what you see are the sort of do's and don'ts for the sake industry based on your experience in the wine world. So if you could share a few of those thoughts, that'd be great.
Definitely. Yeah. So coming from the wine industry before this, I mean, it's not a mistake, or it's not by accident that I'm no longer in the wine industry and I decided to move into the sake industry. And for me, it's because it's so much, there's so much opportunity here, but also because there's so much room to create something new. And so for me, one of the big lessons is, well, I guess if we look at the wine industry right now, it's pretty fractured. Wine in general is in decline. So mass market wine is in pretty significant decline year to year, and it has been for a little while now. So it's kind of like how mass market sake has been in decline year to year. You know, it kind of mirrors that same sort of decline of volume produced beverages and the rise of craft beverages. So just like how premium sake has been rising, premium wine has been rising. And there's a particular subculture of wine or subset of wine that has been experiencing explosive growth. And for me personally at Sunflower Sake, it's an audience that I'm especially focused on because I think that there is a very natural fluid transition between this subcategory of wine and sake, and that's natural wine. So I came from, when I was in my wine career, I was at the end of it focusing primarily on selling natural wine to our local audience. And that's my community, you know, and those are my friends, and those are the people who are kind of more at the forefront of wine culture and creation in the US right now. So whether you like it or not, you know, like some people find it very divisive, but natural wine is what's popular and cool and interesting right now, primarily in big cities, but it's become mainstream enough that you can find natural wine bars throughout the US at this point. And you can find a glass of natural wine in every state in the US. So you can pretty much say that natural wine at this point has reached a point where it's starting to like almost crest, you know. So it so happens then that, to me, I think that sake is such a perfect product to introduce to this same market. These are people who want an authentic story. They want an authentic product. They want traditional manufacturing methods. They want something that's environmentally friendly. They want something with a story. And a lot of the flavors are also, they align perfectly with the tastes of the typical natural wine consumer, especially stuff like Boraimoto or Kimoto or Namazake. So in my opinion, if you get a glass of sake in front of this consumer, it's going to click immediately. They're going to understand it. They're going to like it. They're going to be compelled by it, and they're going to want to learn more. So when I look at wine for lessons, like I said, I'm looking specifically at the areas of wine that are experiencing growth and doing well. And I'm trying to see where sake could slot into that. And there's a couple of businesses, there's a couple of restaurants and bars in the US that serve as like kind of a testing grounds for this idea. One of them is Malay in San Francisco, or Day Trip in Oakland. They're both highly regarded, you know, businesses in their respective fields. But for each of them, they've managed to hybridize wine and sake on their menu in a way that is completely compelling and feels totally natural. And if you go into these places, you'll get a flight that might have a mixture of wine and sake in it, and it feels like it makes complete and total sense. And I think that every major city in the US, every like place where it's cool to get a drink in the US, has the potential to be a natural progression. So for each of those places, and to get sake on the list of each of these cool restaurants throughout the US. So I try to look at these areas of success where this has been tested and where it's working as a benchmark for where sake has a potential to go and which styles I want to focus on in my shop. And for me, which styles I believe have had the most traction with the same audience, which are usually the more interesting styles, like I said, like, or, you know, the more complex styles, I guess, the Kimotos and the Boremotos and so on. So that's one point. And then the other point that I take away from wine is successful marketing. You know, so wine has been stuck in the past in terms of its marketing approach. You know, there's in the 90s, there was a marketing approach that the wine industry adopted, which was based on like Robert Parker points, 100-point system, big rich reds, really like, you know, big flowery language around describing the wines, high alcohol, tons of flavor. And a lot of the wine industry is still using this terminology and this marketing approach. And they've completely lost touch with their changing audience. So it's the segments of the industry that are doing well, that have learned to that their audience has changed and are starting to market towards that audience with these messages of authenticity and sustainability. And so I think that if sake wants to market effectively, that we should take an example from this broadly wine's failure to market to the current audience, and use our strengths to market to this more modern audience.
Really, really interesting. You know, in a lot of ways, I feel like Pablo, you're sort of taking some of those lessons, be they instinctively or not, and applying them, I think, to your product. It was really exciting to see your launch of WESAKE. As I said before, it's brewed in Japan and it's canned, and then you're selling it here in the U.S. market. I guess you're based in New York City, and I'd love to hear about your story, how you got into sake, and what made you launch WESAKE.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Thanks for the intro. Hello, everyone. Very excited to join and tell a bit more about our story and our brand goals. I like to tell my story as a bit of two sides, which one is passion for sake, and the other is finding a market opportunity. So I spent 6 years doing venture capital for Anheuser-Busch InBev, based in New York City. During this time, I had the opportunity to work with many different beverage brands, and some that were at very different growth stages. I believe that this allowed me to gain a lot of insight into the beverage business and some of the biggest consumer trends in the US. And then at the same time in New York, I had a lot of exposure to the booming Japanese cuisine trend and sake as a result, of course. But mainly realized that sake usually in this setting tends to be perceived as formal, distant, and maybe somehow intimidating if you don't know too much about the category. But I was lucky enough to make a trip to Japan in 2017. I had the opportunity to see sake in a new way, and a beverage that usually it's not only made for sushi restaurants, like it's mostly perceived in the US, but something that can be enjoyed with friends, family, and casually over any social occasion. I especially had some great sake drinking experiences doing bar hopping in Shinjuku, which was very fun. And this kind of made me realize that sake could be an experience on its own, that it didn't necessarily have to be paired with food, but it was something that could be enjoyed pretty much in any setting and in a fun setting overall. So after this trip, I started to get very passionate about sake. I became the person who always brought it to any social gathering in New York City. One of the things that struck me right away was that I was bringing this sake into all social settings. I realized that people really enjoyed it when I gave it out, but they all told me that they didn't know anything about it or kind of felt intimidated by it. So with this, I kind of developed 3 questions that kind of led me into creating this brand. These 3 questions are made for non-sake connoisseurs, so the general population, and don't apply to people who already know about sake, but this was the experience that I was having in my social setting. So the 3 questions go like this. So number 1, I always ask, have you heard about sake? And the answer is always yes, which I believe talks to the massive awareness of the category in the US. Then I ask, have you had it and liked it? And the answer is almost always yes. which talks like about sake's amazing drinkability. But then I go and ask, hey, can you tell me a style, grade, category, or can you name a brand? And I always get a no, right? So people, I think, that are a little bit still not too much aware of what's going on in the category. And I think that this talks to the brand affinity gap that happens in the US market. So with this in mind, I developed WESAKE with the sole goal of making sake easy, approachable, and something that can be enjoyed anywhere and anytime. We decided to go do a Junmai Genjo brew in a canned format with approachability in mind, as I believe that the brewery is very easy to enjoy by complete beginners to the category, but also enjoyable for season sake drinkers. And also the canned format, which was like our first introduction, we believe that it makes sake a little bit less intimidating to approach because of the design and the small format. Also think that the small format is, allows consumers to go give sake a try without needing to commit to a full bottle. So making sake a little bit more accessible and approachable as well. So overall, what we're trying to do with WESAKE is kind of reduce the barrier of taste through marketing and branding so that more people are willing to discover the greatness of sake. We kind of think it without, we want to get people to try sake and enjoy it without having to spend too much time learning about it before being able to enjoy it. So we kind of want to be the, that entry point where people try sake and then they love it, and then they go and learn more about it.
Right. That's great. And you actually co-founded WESAKE with kind of a mega influencer, Brooklyn Beckham. Can you tell us, what he brings to the table in your venture here?
Yeah, absolutely. And that has been very fun in the last couple of months. So I met Brooklyn over the summer, and we connected right away. We shared a lot of the same passions. We had a couple of nights out in LA and New York City. We had a couple of really good sushi dinners as well. And we discovered that we had a shared passion for sake as a drink and, how much we liked it. But also we spoke about, the category, the massive awareness that it has, but the low brand affinity. So he was one of the persons that I asked a few questions to, and he was like, yeah, I love sake, I love drinking it, but I cannot tell you anything about it yet. So, we started kind of with that same passion and knowing that, there's a gap in the market and that we want to bring sake to a big new set of consumers. Brooklyn already had this huge passion for Japanese culture, thanks to a couple of treks to Japan with his dad. And also he's really good friends with Chef Nobu Matsuhisa, who has taught him how to do Japanese cuisine and teaching a lot about sake as well. So, he had the same passion as I do, and he thinks that, he can bring it to a new set of people. I believe that, Brooklyn brings a lot to the table thanks to his network and platform. So, he has a massive audience of about 50 million followers. And, through this audience and channel, we're able to showcase sake to a lot of people now. And, so far, I think, we're excited to see that we already have about 4 million views on our branded videos. We actually developed an intro to sake series in partnership with Sake School of America, who's also a member of the Sake Brewers Association. And that our intro to sake video has already been seen about 1.7 million times in just a couple of weeks. So I do believe that he brings, this part where we can put sake in front of so many more consumers. Also, thanks to Brooklyn, we're able to get some mass media outlets talking about sake, such as Forbes, Rolling Stones, and Interview Magazine. So I think this is a great opportunity, of course, for our brand, but overall for the sake category, because we're trying to get more people talking about it. So yeah, super excited to have him on board and help us raise overall awareness to the category and, supporting our vision of making sake a part of everyday life.
That's great. It's a really interesting model too, because, we sometimes think it'd be great to have sort of brand ambassadors out there promoting sake. And at least in my experience, I haven't seen too many people of the sort of celebrity or sort of quasi-celebrity status taking on that role, and you've actually managed to sort of incorporate such a person into your leadership. I'm wondering, like, if Matt or Nina have any reactions to that. Whether you think that's something that's replicable, or something that other sake producers and brands should emulate, or yeah, what do you make of that?
You know, I'll just say I think it's brilliant, and I really do. I'm one of those 1.7 million viewers. I love the introduction from WESAKE. It was great.
Thank you.
We need more of that. The problem is, as you know, Wes, is that from a craft brewery standpoint, budgets are definitely a concern, and for us to go out and get a celebrity endorsement would be cost prohibitive for most startups. And back to the point that we talked about at that summit was, you know, a way that we as a association can band together and lift the entire category, not just an individual brand. I think there's value in that from an endorsement that would align with the values of sake for America, right? And so I hope to see more of that, and I hope to see that you know, we're excited about what WESAKE is doing, and I think in general it lifts all boats, right? So rising tide is great,
Right.
and we hope to contribute in the way we can as well. So
Absolutely. Nina, any reaction to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that most marketing initiatives these days involve influencers at each level. You know, so usually there's a certain number of people that you target that have, you know, between like 1,000 and 10,000 followers. You're looking for some that are at higher tiers of audience. And just like with any beverage category too, there's going to be different tiers of like not quality, but like price point, you know, and level of like geekiness and involvement and nerdiness, and each of them is going to have an audience that is appropriate for them, and each of them is going to have a subset of influencers or celebrities or whoever that's appropriate to reach that audience. So while, you know, like if you're planning on launching a brand that's going to be like you're seeking wide acceptance in the market and you're seeking like a brand new audience, then partnering with a celebrity such as Brooklyn is awesome. And like Matt pointed out, rising tide absolutely raises all boats. Additional awareness and excitement and conversation around this category is good for us all. You know, sake on the whole is something that's widely recognized by consumers throughout the US. Like you pointed out, both Matt and Pablo, like everyone knows the word sake in the US. So we're not reaching to a point for people to become aware of what sake is. We're trying to redefine it within our respective categories. We're trying to recontextualize it as something that's quality. And that's been done before by rosé, by tequila, by mezcal, by beer, you know, coffee. Like this isn't the first time a category has been associated with, you know, low quality or not being tasty or being poorly understood and trying to be recontextualized as something that's high quality. So I appreciate that someone has the resources to be able to attack that larger chunk, because that's definitely something I wouldn't be able to do. But if it was me who's trying to like attack my own little corner of the market with, you know, these like niche imports that I have behind me that I have to hand sell, but I'm excited to hand sell, I'm going to look to, you know, local sommeliers, local restaurateurs, these other figures, like people who are popular, like hot distributors and importers in the US, like Zevrovine and Skurnik, who are working with sake and like making it cool and getting it in front of the cool and really influential buyers and sommeliers in America. Those are the outlets that are tangible and understandable for me and accessible for me. And so that's for me what I would be looking at. But it takes every level, you know, it takes influencing every level for the whole thing to work.
Absolutely. You know, I earlier when I was talking about what going mainstream or making sake more mainstream would look to me, these are very personal, sort of my own sort of take on that. And I wonder if, you know, if you all have different ideas of what that looks like. I'd be interested to hear from each of you what you think when we talked about making sake mainstream or more mainstream, what does that really constitute? I can imagine that for different people that means different things. I think Matt, earlier when we had our kind of practice session, you said you'd love to see the market share grow from where it is 0.2% to something more like 2%. I think that's a really reasonable goal. Do you want to talk more
Sure.
about?
Sure. I think we in this industry understand how undervalued sake is as a beverage, right? And Americans typically consider drinking sake as an experience that they enjoy at a sushi restaurant. And just changing that, you go from 0.2% to 2%, that's a tenfold increase. But what percentage of sushi restaurants are American restaurants, right? It's probably less than that, right? So just getting outside that market share to any restaurant that serves wine by the glass, and introducing that and having to educate, you do have to educate, right? You have to educate how to pair it, and what it pairs well and what styles go with what. But that's fairly easy with sophisticated sommeliers, right? They understand it once they taste it. And that's really where a lot of our focus is going to be, right? It's just expanding the on-premise sales outside of typical Asian cuisine.
Right. Pablo, what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
this?
No, I think the same. I bring it down to, what it looks for me, and it's a little bit of our goals as well, is for me and being based in New York, I love drinking sake, and you can only drink sake in the Japanese places, right? Or, there's some amazing sake bars in the city as well. But for me, it looks like having sake on the menu, right? On a lot of the places that I like to go. And New York has a massive offer of bars and restaurants. And I want to see sake as an option there, and that's what we're working towards, right? We've been lucky to get it into some spot that are not Asian related whatsoever, and they're more like social gathering places. And that's what I want to see, right? I want to see sake as an option in more places that are not only necessary Japanese cuisine. And I think it fits so well, every time, and I think Matt and Nina were saying it as well. Every time you get someone to try good and premium high quality sake, the reactions are amazing. Like everyone is like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm not drinking this more. Like it's so easy to drink, so enjoyable. I think that as Matt was saying, a lot of people are sticking to the idea of warm sake at a hibachi place, maybe. Like that was the first introduction to sake. But when they try a really good brew, they're like, oh my God, this is so good. So that's what I want to see. That's what we're working towards, and trying to get, again, as I mentioned, reduce the barrier of taste, get more people to consider sake as an option, because we know that once they try it, they're gonna like it, and we'll definitely be able to integrate it into the lifestyle, and overall making sure that sake is an option for consumers. And, that's the way that we see it.
Just beaming in from Tokyo real quick, just to make sure that we get a couple of questions in here. Sorry to barge in on your conversation. I like where this is going, and if I may be so bold, Weston, as to impart a question here for Pablo was just speaking before, so I'm going to stick with him. There's a question on YouTube from Harold Durop asking where the canning of your products takes place. Is it in the US or is it in Japan?
Yes, so we had a couple of options, right, when we were developing our product. One was canning in Japan or in the US. What we realized through our consumer testing and what we were developing the product is that the only option that we had for cans in Japan were the ones where the whole lid comes up, which we like as a format for serving and sharing. But when we tested out as a ready to drink kind of beverage, a lot of consumers didn't like the experience of pulling the whole thing. So we decided to find a way to get a can that resembles maybe a beer can where the lid stays on, so that people can drink it right out of the can. Especially thinking on summer settings and more, that you can take it, focusing on portability, that you can just open and drink it there. So we import our sake from Japan, from Kobe, and then we can it in California for that reason. So that we can use that type of can.
Understood. And this is a follow-up question from the same viewer. They're wondering if you have any plans, or would it be possible to can product that is Nihonshu sake that is produced in the United States, since you're canning in the States?
Yes. The reason that we were sticking to Japan right now, it's just how we wanted to communicate our brand at the beginning. As I mentioned, I think that a lot of consumers believe that sake should only be brewed in Japan, which is completely mistaken. And as Matt is saying, and working with Origami, there's an amazing amount of craft brewers in the US that make some amazing brews. But for us, from the approachability standpoint and making communication easier, we thought that to start, it was easier to communicate that it was a product brewed in Japan. But we're not close to the idea to bring in the US whatsoever. I think that, there's amazing brewers, and it's definitely an option for us.
Fantastic.
There's actually several of our brewers that produce canned products here in the States. Sawtell in LA comes to mind, Wetland Sake in New Orleans. I believe Farthest Star Sake in Massachusetts makes a canned product. So it's definitely out there, and I encourage the viewers to check them out.
Yeah.
All great recommendations. Over to Origami Sake for a moment. We have a comment, a recommendation. I guess this can lead to a question. The comment or the advice also from Harold on YouTube is to turn what you are creating into some form of a destination location, whether that involves a restaurant, or maybe it even has a glamping opportunity or some sort of hotel connection. Is anything like that in the works?
Yes and no. I can tell you that we have a tasting room, and it's primarily for education purposes, to educate industry professionals. We don't have necessarily a bar there or food at this location. It is a industrial manufacturing facility. It's an old FDA approved facility. It's 25,000 square feet, fairly large, and it's really not convenient to foot traffic. That being said, Hot Springs is a tourist destination. The city in itself is, and it's the oldest national park, city national park in the U.S. Has great, hot springs tourism, spas, fabulous hotels, a casino, and a horse track. So around that, we are going to start planning different events throughout the year that pair with local restaurants. Likely we'll have a tasting room in the Central Business District, which is downtown in Hot Springs. That's more convenient for people to come and visit. And then annual events around, Arkansas Derby. It's one of the highest purses in American horse racing. I think it might be the largest purse right now. So a lot of different things that can happen around that. We're excited about.
Can't wait to see how that all comes together. Fantastic. With a final, maybe a last question that I'd like to bend in Nina's direction, and maybe Weston, you can chime in on this as well and lead us out of the session. How, and I think this is a question that many people that are either in the industry or adjacent to the industry are curious about, but how do you explain what is a quote unquote good sake to people? Because you're dealing with customers all the time, I'm very interested to hear your take on this. And again, Weston, feel free to chime in as well. But Nina, what's your general avenue on this question?
Well, my answer is probably going to be just a non-answer, and it'll be frustrating. And my answer is that it's totally subjective. It's just like with wine. It's going to be different for each person. It's going to be different depending on the day, depending on the mood, depending on the environment. And I think that tastes evolve a lot. When I first started drinking sake, for me, the only thing that I thought was good was, a namazake from Japan. And so now I think that a whole wide range of sake are good, and it depends on my mood on that given day. So I think that you need to define good for yourself, and that requires tasting and experimenting and being open-hearted and engaging with a product on a regular basis with an open mind. So only you can define good for yourself.
Very fair. Very fair. Weston?
I mean, I would define good sake as anything that doesn't give you a bad headache. And beyond that, I mean, I think one of the beauties of sake, and something that we all know, those of us that love it, is that there's such a variety to it. I mean, there really is. It's great that you have light-bodied sakes and heavy-bodied sakes and dry sakes and sweet sakes, and in the States we see quite a few flavored sakes. There's a sake, I tell people, for everyone. A sake for every type of person, I think. And if there's a sake for everyone if they give it a try. And so that to me is what I think is one of the great attributes of sake. And I think that's the sort of fun and the excitement and the potential of sake moving forward, is that we have this incredible sort of range of products to introduce to American consumers. And I'll say that, like, when they can test all of these things, and they can figure out which are the ones that they most like and they most gravitate toward, that's a really exciting thing. And it's really great to see, when we had our American Craft Sake Festival, for instance, in at Ben's American Sake in Asheville. We had kind of our first kind of People's Choice Sake competition. And the two co-winners were Islander Sake from Hawaii, which makes a very classic style Japanese sake, and the Void Sake from Lexington, Kentucky, which makes really fun flavored sakes. And I think that speaks to the incredible range of sake again. And it's great that people can choose where in that spectrum they want to try sakes and really invest in them. So that's to me a very exciting thing.
It is. We're just getting started. It feels like there's so much more in store. And thank you everybody on this show right now for everything that you're doing in your own way, in your own niche of the market, to wake people up to the beauty in this category, and to create more joy for everyone, whether it's sitting on the porch drinking sake in the afternoon, taking a hike with cans of sake in their rucksack, or pairing with any type of cuisine from around the world. And I think that's something that we're just getting started with. So thank you, everybody. And for now, it's goodbye. But I think Weston, if you have any final comments, I'd love to let you sign it off, and then I'll transition to the next video.
Thanks, Chris. No, nothing beyond what we've already talked about. Just a big thank you to you and to JSS and to our panelists here tonight. This is really a great opportunity to showcase North American sake and with a broad audience, and it's just super exciting. And this is just a great program. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Wes. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Pablo.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.